I would like to start this video off by explaining my relationship with the natural hair movement. Growing up, like many white women, I treated my hair as if it were straight. My mother did not know the first thing about hair and always kept hers short. Consequently, I grew up not knowing my hair's full potential. After years of dyeing and straightening my hair, in 2018 I made the decision to shave my head and start over. This led to an obsession with taking care of my hair that brought me into the curly hair community and the realm of natural hair care. After a while of using products from the ethnic hair section of the store and feeling awkward about it, I did some research to confirm that I was indeed culturally appropriating. A brief rundown of the history of black hair in America starts with pressing combs, which were developed by the French in 1845 and arrived in America in 1880. Then came the first hair relaxer in 1909 by Garrett A. Morgan, a sewing machine repairman. Subsequent versions would include a permanent relaxer for men and shortly thereafter for women. The desire for smooth hair came from the stigma of having Afro-textured hair that came about during colonialism. In discussing her book titled Don't Touch My Hair, Emma Dabiri points out that Afro-textured hair had no stigma before the dehumanization of black people that emerged from slavery. In the early 1900s, a black woman named Madam C.J. Walker left her job working for black hair care pioneer Annie Turnbull Malone to create her own line of hair care products after losing much of her hair to a scalp disorder. This revolutionized the black hair industry and made her the first self-made black American female millionaire. This is especially notable since she was her family's fifth child, but the first to be born free after the Emancipation Proclamation of 1862. Following emancipation, as blacks were expected to assimilate to white culture, smooth, straight hairstyles increased in popularity. Madam Walker's hair care brand still lives on today and is encompassed by Sundial Brands, who also owns a renowned hair care line, Shea Moisture. Sundial Brands was a black-owned business until 2017, when it was acquired by the Unilever Corporation. According to Unilever, this agreement accelerates their brand's personal care category growth by addressing underserved needs of multicultural and millennial consumers. Now that I've laid out the basics, it's time to get real. The natural hair movement entered the scene in the 1960s with the iconic Afro hairstyle. It died out in the 70s as another wave of oppression hit. Afros became a target of law enforcement. Consequently, straight, smooth hair became even more popular, and with the improvement of hair straightening technology and products, the black hair industry in the United States was well on its way to becoming incredibly lucrative. This is evidence of racial capitalism, and an article I came across with the title The Black Hair Industry, a $2.5 billion business built on racism and self-hate, confirms that. According to the Harvard Law Review, racial capitalism relies upon and reinforces commodification of racial identity, thereby degrading that identity by reducing it to another thing to be bought and sold. In the early 2000s, the natural hair movement made a resurgence. This was also around the time that UK author and hairstylist Lorraine Massey came out with a line of hair care products aimed at the broader curly hair community. Following the release of her hair care line, Massey came up with a regime of curly hair care rules that she eventually put into a book called Curly Girl: The Handbook. Her book was coveted by curly girls everywhere who were finally able to figure out their hair. But where did Massey come up with this stuff?
So most of the knowledge in the Curly Girl method is knowledge that's been passed down for generations in the black community.
Certain products, we index triple what the white market does. We're 12% of the population, but we buy 80% of the hair.
Wow. I got in the wrong business.
Flipping through Curly Girl: The Handbook, I see mostly Caucasian models. While the book doesn't claim to be written for a specific ethnicity, it is blatantly clear that its authors had white women in mind. In Chapter 1, Massey explains that when she tried to find any scrap of information she could about curly hair, she came up empty-handed. This could be because this type of information, at least in the black community, was passed down through word of mouth. Or it could be related to the fact that she was born in England, where the effects of colonialism are still very noticeable. In the same chapter, after confessing that she used to think curly hair was ugly, Massey acknowledges that a sociologist might point out that for many people, this preference for straight hair was a subtle form of racism. As I work my way through the book, I land on what seems to be the only mention of African American hair in Chapter 6, Multicultural Hair. Supposedly this chapter contains hair care advice from a black woman, yet there is no credit given to anyone other than Massey and her co-author Michelle Bender, who are both white. This brings up elements of whiteness and white power by how Massey seems to believe that her knowledge is organic and that it has not, in fact, been circulating in Black communities for centuries. While I'm sure that Lorraine Massey's book did not intend to be overtly racist, I am not the first to critique her work for this reason. However, as Patricia Hill Collins writes in Black Feminist Thought, Knowledge, Consciousness, and the Politics of Empowerment, given that groups are unequal in power making themselves heard, dominant groups have a vested interest in suppressing the knowledge produced by subordinate groups. So regardless of whether she intended to be racist, she ultimately perpetuated racist ideologies by asserting her dominance over the curly world. If you only just now made the connection between the natural hair movement and racism, you are not alone. But as Natural Hair Mag points out, natural hair was never meant to only focus on texture. It's a political movement that's framed around a particular type of identity resisting white supremacy. To have white women join the movement is counterproductive because they still benefit from white supremacy regardless of their hair texture. That said, it is possible to be white and have gorgeous curls. You just need to acknowledge that your hair would not be as gorgeous without the knowledge and experience of Black folks and be committed to dismantling racism. You should also consider buying from Black-owned brands to close the racial wealth gap. In my research for this video, I have come to the realization that my privileges as a white person have allowed me to jump on the curly hair bandwagon without repercussions. While wearing my hair curly may not seem controversial to me, Black folks have historically been oppressed for having curly hair, so it is necessary for me to consider why I am able to covet my own curly hair without fear of oppression. Dissemination of knowledge of where proper credit is due in the curly hair community is something that I am committed to. My own racial awareness has been severely limited for most of my life, and it was not until I returned to college at the age of 32 that I had really considered that. Most of what I have learned thus far has gone against my indoctrination. As Robin DiAngelo writes in her book White Fragility, going forward we can demand that we be given this information in schools and universities and that we not be required to take special elective courses to be exposed to it. What I plan to do from this point forward is create more videos and disseminate the knowledge that the curly hair community would not exist without the knowledge and experience of Black folks. One of the YouTubers I follow sums it up perfectly.
Almost all of these techniques came from Black women in the natural hair movement, were taught to us by them, and those that weren't were developed or expanded on off of the original styles. Black women especially and the natural hair movement have paved the way in almost, if not all, aspects of curly hair.
So whether you are a part of the curly hair community or not, knowing the history connected to Black hair and the natural hair movement is an essential component of being an ally or an accomplice. At this stage in my life, I am committed to being an ally rather than an accomplice because my own personal resources are relatively limited as I complete my bachelor's degree at the University of Washington.